All right, my clock says 7:03. We've given everybody a chance to get here that is going to be at least to start on time. We'll welcome people as they join over the next few minutes if they're coming in a little bit late. But it's a real pleasure to be here with everyone this evening, trying to really strengthen our relationship, the new relationship that Delta Kappa Epsilon is working with Alpha Fraternity Management to help with the education and services that are provided to the chapters. This is an example where we're really looking to try to help the chapters function as well financially as possible. As I mentioned a second ago, please use a Q&A function. At the end of this presentation, we will develop a slide package of what's being presented here that'll be distributed to all of the people on the call. We're also recording this, and this will be posted to the Alpha Fraternity Management website so that your other officers or people that may not have been able to join tonight can access that. We'll share that link with the staff at DKE so that they can blast it out to you as well if it's something that would be helpful. So we want to share the information and get it out there so that you can have as great a semester this fall as possible, given all the nutty things that are happening out there. With that, I'd like to introduce Turner Spears. Turner is Director of Alumni Services for Delta Kappa Epsilon and is taking a great leadership role in the national fraternity as we work with him on a daily basis. Turner's got great knowledge and really great approach to how he does his job in helping his chapters. So Turner's going to start out by discussing just a little bit about Delta Kappa Epsilon and some of the new policies and how it views the role of its treasurers. And then I'll be launching into more of the nitty-gritty and helping you with some of the more granular details of your position. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Turner.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks to Allan and everybody over at AFM for putting on this training for our treasurers. AFM is a great partner for DKE, both in terms of our administrative and billing services, as well as being our preferred partner in all things housing. If you haven't looked into the services that they offer at the local chapter level, I highly encourage you to connect with them and just explore what all those services are. And thanks to all the participants for joining us tonight. Definitely very happy that we can get together and talk about how we can be successful financially in the coming year. So whenever the international organization does training for our officers, I like to discuss what success looks like. So throughout the presentation, we'll discuss what success looks like in the actual business practices. But at the beginning of the presentation, I wanted to take some time to discuss what success looks like outside of just the technical skills. Specifically, I wanted to discuss how leadership, communication, and the process play into making a treasurer successful. So leadership is important in any position. When considering the treasurer specifically, leading by example and with transparency is even more important. So part of leading by example is being proactive in your planning. This could be developing a budget early on, ensuring that that's feasible, and determining that expectations and policies around collecting dues and spending funds. So if your expectation for chapter members are to pay their dues, on time and efficiently, you should lead by example in developing the plan around this and showing why it's important to pay those. Furthermore, there's there's a fundamental skepticism about what dues go towards. So as a best practice, it's important to operate with all possible transparency. And to do that, using communication, communicating about that budget early on, offering some regular updates, and explaining your expectations around the collection process is so key just to get everybody off on the right foot. You'll hear us talk about policies and expectations a lot, and I think that directly ties into the process. So the idea is to create a streamlined process that upholds your policies. So for Delta Kappa Epsilon as an international organization, our policy is pretty simple and straightforward. It's that all of our organizations at the local level carry a zero balance with the international fraternity, and all members carry a zero balance with the international organization and the local organizations as well. So basically all that means is that the policy is that all members stay current with their financial commitment to the fraternity. So in terms of due dates, we published a document outlining all the due dates for the fall semester. That includes important dates for active members as well as new members. I encourage you to review that sheet often, and you can always reach out to Julie at AFM or myself if you've got if you want to get your hands on that sheet if you haven't gotten it already. Some important upcoming dates to consider is August 15th is when your initial bill is going to be issued to you. And then on September 10th or September 17th, depending on when your chapter starts school, either before Labor Day or after Labor Day, that will be the last day to make updates for your Fall 20 roster. And then on either September 15th or September 22nd is the first date that those dues become due. So please note that that will be split into 2 installments, about 30 days apart, and that there's a 10% discount in dues for any organization that pays the full semester upfront on either September 15th or September 22nd. So I highly encourage you all to take advantage of that discount that DKE's offering. And so the last portion is that we often get questions about what the local or what the dues paid to international go to. And I think this is a very fair question, and I encourage you to ask it regularly, often to the international body. We want to be as transparent as possible with you at all times. So basically what your dues go towards can be broken down into 3 categories. So insurance, staff support, and the organization's infrastructure. So in terms of insurance, this is both the traditional liability insurance that you're familiar with, and then the member accident protection program, and a couple other smaller categories. So the the traditional liability insurance that's where it's applicable to any sorts of lawsuits or cases that the local or international organization gets into. So that pretty much protects the organization. The member accident protection program is an additional insurance on top of your personal health insurance that your parents carry for you. And that applies whether you're at the fraternity house or not. So that's a great value that's offered to our members that I don't think it's talked about a lot. So if you're interested in learning more about those 2 programs, feel free to reach out to me at any point, and I can get you connected with resources that explain it more in depth. Staff support is just what it sounds like. So that's people like myself or Travis or Craig that work with the chapters daily. But our job primarily is to promote the success of Delta Kappa Epsilon across North America. So whether it's servicing chapters, whether it's working with expansions at universities, whether it's just bettering our services all around, that's what that portion of dues go to. And then the last is just the organization's infrastructure. So these are all the additional services and platforms that we offer to you as a member, and especially as an officer. So these include Chapter Builder, which is a virtual recruitment platform that's going to be very, very helpful to you guys this coming semester. And it also includes things like Alpha Fraternity Management services. So when they produce these webinars, they give you great advice. That's what those dues go towards. And also, just the basic infrastructure, paying the phone bill at the headquarters, making sure that you've got the ability to reach out and contact us. So, yeah, that's kind of the basic overview I wanted to give at the beginning. If you have any questions at all, please contact me at turner@dke.org. That's turner@dke.org, or by phone at 865-438-4739. And you can always get in touch with us by dialing the number on our website that connects us to the office. But yeah, thanks again to Allan for putting this on. Amazing service that he's offering to the chapters.
Very good, Turner. Thanks very much. I'll take it from here, and I'm going to start out by just talking about what the typical duties are of a chapter treasurer. I've been working with fraternity chapter treasurers for over 30 years as a volunteer, and professionally now for 16 years. So we've gotten to know their strengths and their weaknesses, where they're make mistakes. And my hope is by sharing a lot of this information with you, I'll help you avoid the mistakes that others have made before you. So really, the duties of the chapter can be summarized in 6 primary points, or 6 primary duties. The first being is preparing a chapter budget for the approval of the chapter or the exec board, which is the approval processes would be based in your bylaws. But the treasurer prepares a budget, presents it, and there's through a vote of approval either at the executive council or through the full chapter. And based upon that budget, it determines what your chapter dues are going to be. It may also determine what the charges for food service or for housing may be, depending upon how your organization runs things. We're going to provide a tool this evening to help you. In fact, we've already copied it to the shared folder that all of the treasurers and Beta Brother presidents have, so that you can access that. And that template will provide you with a lot of shortcuts to create budgets and develop what your dues will look like to your members based on that. The second duty is to invoice and collect funds from the members. The chapter needs money to create its programming, and it's your job to make sure that the members know how much they're supposed to pay and that they pay it. The third thing is that you're in charge of paying bills and maintaining records related to the expenses of the chapter. 4, any contracts that your chapter is signing, it's the responsibility of the treasurer, often in combination with the chapter president, to review those contracts ahead of time and make sure that your chapter has adequate protections in those contracts, so that you're not taken advantage of. And then number 5, prepare and present financial reports. At least monthly, I believe a chapter treasurer should be presenting financial reports to the chapter on the monies that have been collected, the monies that have been spent. For those accounting majors out there, that would typically be called an income statement. You should also be presenting an accounts receivable report showing delinquent members, and sharing that information with the chapter so that they know their money is being spent wisely. And then lastly, an important item that is often overlooked is that the chapter treasurer is responsible for filing your annual IRS tax return. We'll share more about that process. It's not a process to be scared about. If you do the other duties well, it's a piece of cake. If you don't do the other duties well, it's a real challenge, but that is a responsibility of the chapter treasurer. And then the last thing I want to say about chapter treasurer is that you have a duty as a fiduciary. And that may be a foreign word to some people, but what it really means is that you're responsible for looking out for the interests of the chapter, even above your own personal interests. So when you take this job, both from an organizational standpoint and also under the law, you're responsible to be taking care of the interests of the chapter, the financial interests, in a way that follows the law, that follows good ethics, that's transparent, is what Turner said earlier. That is your responsibility, and it's a responsibility that I think you should take seriously. So the first step in the process is creating a chapter budget. A chapter budget, it's important to understand that these should be created and approved at least 60 days prior to the start of each semester. That will allow enough communication and transparency, and that will also give you enough time to properly bill the members and give them an opportunity to pay, so the money comes in before you need it. And creating a budget isn't really anything that's tremendously difficult, especially at a chapter level. You start by looking at your expenses for the past 12 months. If you've had a good treasurer before you, you'll have some financial reports, or maybe the data is included in a program like QuickBooks, or if you work with Alpha Fraternity Management, you could get that off of our officer web portal. And that provides things broken down by expense account, and you can drill down on those to see what was spent. If you don't have the luxury of having that information from a prior treasurer, you need to go back and look at your bank statements. And you'll usually have online access to the chapter bank account, and almost all banks will go back at least 13 months providing statement by statement. And often electronically, you can go down and click on checks or payments and see who those payments went out to. And from that, you can get a pretty good sense on, what was spent on the composite, or what was spent on IFC dues, or those sorts of things, to start filling in the blanks in your draft budget. The next part of the process is you should go out to your committee chairman and the other officers and say, based upon our goals and our plans for this upcoming semester, what sort of budget do you need in order to do your job? What sort of money do you need to do that philanthropy project that we've been talking about for the last year? And you should give them enough time for them to think through and really create their own budget for each of their committees or each of their projects that they're in charge of. And then you give these guys a deadline and ask the officers and committee chairmen to provide their budgets. And you take that information and you start to insert it into your budget spreadsheet. Now, realistically, you're going to get requests for some crazy things from, chapter chairman. The Brotherhood chairman wants a 16-person hot tub to put in back of the house. That's 10 grand. The IM sports chairman, he wants to put a refrigerated hockey rink in the front yard. You're going to get some of these things that are just unreasonable. And that becomes something that you have to weigh the importance of the requests, and that those things get discussed at a larger level. So as you get all of these, you're considering the goals, the new programs that are going in there. You're going to take all of this and put it into a draft spreadsheet. And maybe the draft spreadsheet even includes the numbers, the crazy numbers that some of the committee chairmen may request, and you put it in that spreadsheet. We'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But then from that draft budget, you're going to start to drill down on, if we were to fund all of these requests, what would our dues for the semester look like? And with some of these big requests, you may see dues that are just in a range that are uncomfortable for a lot of the members to support. And so here's the process where you usually will take that budget to the e-board, and over the course of a half an hour, 45 minutes, you have a roundtable discussion and talk about the merits of each of the budgets and the goals, the programs, everything you want to accomplish. And from that, you drill down. And as part of that process, you're really trying to balance the affordability of the chapter dues with the needs of the chapter to do their programming. And it's really not a difficult process. Generally, the guy who wanted the ice rink in the front yard gets laughed out of the room, and he gets a standard $500 IM sports budget, and everybody has a good laugh with it. But that's a process of transparency. That's a process where people have an opportunity to give input, and results in a budget that that people can support. And then based upon that final budget, the e-board would typically take a vote to approve that budget, and if your bylaws require it, you would then take it to the chapter for a vote. You should check your bylaws for what's required in your particular instance. The other thing is, you're creating a budget that is really vitally important to understand, is that all your members aren't going to pay their dues or pay their dues on time. There's going to be a percentage of your guys that are going to drag things out, try to skate on it if they can, or that just financially, because of their own personal resources, they can't immediately come up with that money. And you've got to have a way to work through that and to account for that in your budgeting process. And so what we find when we work with most chapters, especially if they've been lax on collections previously, a chapter will get kind of a culture or an understanding that, yeah, really, if I don't pay my dues, it's no big deal. There's really no penalties. You know, I'm friends with the treasurer, so I'll twist his arm and he'll let me get out of it. You get those sorts of attitudes that develop, and it gets harder and harder to collect funds on a timely fashion. And then, you know, you've got a big event and you're screwing around trying to get people to pay their dues because you don't have enough money to fund the event. And that's not a good position to be in for a treasurer. So understand that the average chapters that we start out working with, if we really examine their books or look if they've been using a collection system previously, an online billing program or something like that, we typically find that most chapters are collecting about 80 to 85% of the money that they bill. And so they're really leaving a lot of money on the table, and that money is either starving the chapter from the programming that you would hope to do, or it's causing your dues to be unnecessarily high and penalizing the guys that pay on time. And so you really need to consider that and be prepared for that. And what we hear from many chapter treasurers is that, you know, the worst part of their job is collecting money from the other guys in the house. They don't like to be the enforcer. They're a little bit intimidated to go and ask the senior, you know, they're a sophomore and they're intimidated to ask a senior to pay his dues, think they're going to get told off, or, you know, their best friend hasn't paid and it strains the relationships. All of those sorts of things makes it a challenge to collect those dues. And that's where using a service like Alpha Fraternity Management's AlPay system, which we're offering at special pricing to DKE chapters, is really a benefit. And with our system, we're the ones that are doing the follow-up and the collections. We're making sure that people sign the contracts they need to, advising the chapter treasurer on their affairs and contracts and so forth. And because we treat it like a business, and because, you know, we're not worried that that guy's my best friend, he's going to hate me if I give him a late fee, we tend to collect much more money than a chapter would do on their own. And our collection rate for chapter dues runs between 95 and 98% of the dues that are billed to the members. And we aren't mean, we don't make threats, we don't have Guido and Vinny on retainer to go out and break kneecaps. It's nothing like that. It's just following up with people. And I'll share a little bit more about some of the strategies of how to collect money a little bit later. But what you'll find is, you know, if you're running a $100,000 chapter budget, and based on our fees, after you pay Alpha Fraternity Management our fees, you're going to have an extra 5 to 10% of income, even after our fees, that are going to come into the chapter, because we're creating a culture where people are going to pay, expect to pay, and will pay on time. So I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration here on our budget template. The template, I'll first start out by saying that we have 3 tabs here at the bottom for the 3 main things that you might want to budget. There's a tab for housing, there's a tab for food service, and a tab for chapter dues. We'll be focusing on chapter dues tonight, but you know, we're happy to do more training sessions on the food service and housing budget if that would be a benefit. But everybody needs to start with the chapter dues budget. So this is a good place to start. So we recommend that you're always budgeting at least 1 semester in advance. And that might be because you have a big philanthropy project, let's say in March, that's going to require a lot more funds that semester. And you may want to break that up over 2 semesters. The payments to DKE, you know, come early in the semester. You need to know about that and be planning for those things in advance. So all of that helps in planning. But as you start with this template, you're going to start with your roster. As we come back this fall, we're doing this analysis based upon a chapter with potentially 50 members. And so, you know, we have 20 sophomores coming back, 15 juniors, 15 seniors, for a total of 50 in the fall. We're then going to have recruitment, and in this case, we're going to have 10 pledges. We're expecting about 10 pledges here, and those 10 pledges are going to initiate and become full members in the spring term, and so they would be added to that count then. And you need to also consider that perhaps some of your juniors or some guys are going to go on a study abroad program. And additionally, you may have some seniors that graduate in December, and that's going to affect your totals as well. So, you know, you got to kind of be polling your guys and knowing what their plans are so that you can budget effectively. And then you're also going to take a shot at what do you think your recruitment's going to be like in the fall. Generally, you can look back over the past couple years of pledge classes in each term and get an idea of what's the bigger pledge class of the semester or whatever, and kind of fill in some estimates on those sorts of things there. Some of your expenses are going to be based upon your member count. For instance, IFC dues are typically based on the number of active members on campus. So it's important to know what those dues are and then how it's going to apply to your members. Similarly, your international fraternities dues are based on the number of active members, and they're broken down between the international member dues, the health and safety fees, which have previously been called risk management fees. There's also new member initiation fees that are paid by your new members as they initiate. And so all of those have a factor that are based off of these numbers up here that start to fill in these blanks, and those transfer further down into our spreadsheet. And then we've created the typical sorts of expense accounts that are used by the different chapters that we've worked with over the years. Academic and Scholarship Committee, so you have to pay a group to handle your accounting fees. You might get bank charges if someone has a member pays with a check that's non-sufficient funds. Your composite, all of those sorts of things are items that you want to consider. And so if we just kind of create a typical chapter budget here, and if we say that the accounting fees are going to be $500 in the spring, that you know, the Brotherhood Committee gets $300 per semester for tailgates, that sort of thing. You know, we do a composite every year. That payment comes due in December. That's $1,200. You know, there's Greek Week on campus. That's usually about a $1,500 expense. You know, IM Sports Committee registering for different sports each term. Now, merchant processing fees are important to understand. We see a lot of groups overlooking that sort of thing. Merchant processing services are charged by the credit card companies to process a credit card payment. The other types of processing fees are electronic bank transfers that are often called e-checks or ACH payments. ACH stands for Automatic Clearinghouse. And with those payments, depending upon what service you're using, you're going to pay typically around 3% of whatever a credit card processing fee is, if that's being charged back to the chapter. And an electronic bank payment is much more affordable, typically costing about 75 cents per transaction. Now, if you work with AFM through our portal and our services, the credit card fees are passed on to the user. So if the user decides to pay by credit card, they pay a convenience fee that's equal to that 3% that pays the credit card company for the processing of that. And that's why this 3% is one of the reasons why banks give away frequent flyer miles and rebates and special promotions, is because they're making money charging these fees and trying to promote the use of the card. So it's really important, you know, whichever service you might be using to help with that, that you understand how you're going to be charged for those fees. In our case, it works out to be about $1 to $2 per member per semester. So based on a 50-man chapter, I'm going to put $100 in there for that. But if you're using some of the other services out there that are charging you like 3% or more of each credit card or electronic payment fee that they process, you may have $3,000 per semester for those charges that you have to add back into your dues. National convention fees, actually for your national events, your national fee for that is $900 per year or $450 per semester. You'll see that we've automatically calculated some the dues to national and for all of those sorts of things here based upon the formulas and the member counts above. Let's say we want $1,000 for philanthropy, one philanthropy event, and we're going to have a few parties, so we're going to give a $100,000 budget to social. Oh, actually, that we'll make that 2,000. We actually worked with a chapter that had a $250,000 social budget for the year one time. So again, you're just kind of going down and considering all these other things. And if we haven't included a some sort of expense in a typical description above, here's where you can kind of change it and put in the alternate expenses that you may have that don't fit the standard budget. And so maybe we'll just throw a couple $100 in for the ice rink here. And there you'll see that we total going down here, and you see about what's going to be needed each semester in order to fund those programs. And the numbers I put in are obviously fictitious, so I don't know if this is going to turn out to be affordable budget or not, but you get the idea that how the template works. Now, this is an important field here because this is based on the collection rate that I mentioned earlier. And if you are doing this yourself and you're unsure about how it's going to go, I would suggest you use at least a 15% factor for underpayment. You're much better being too conservative here and estimating a lesser collection rate than what actually happens. Having a little extra money in your budget is fine. Then you can decrease the next semester's dues, or you can use it for a special event like a pledge formal or something like that. But you can see here that with a 15% factor for late or non-payment, we're adding an extra nearly $8,500 to the budget per year. Whereas if you're working with AFM, and let's say this number becomes 4%, you can see that that number is $2,200 per year. So we go from $8,500 that was a factor down to $2,200. Theoretically, by using a good service, the chapter is going to have an extra $5,000 in its accounts, or we can reduce the budget so the dues are lower. And so there's two formulas here where we look at how much the dues would work out for new members. You've got to cover those new member fees. We then have our remaining budget, which is kind of transferring from above there, dividing that by 50 guys. Actually, this number, it's like I've got a formula error here. This should be, whoop. Sorry about that. This number should be there. And based on 50 members, you'll see that 50 times 531.44 covers that budget with the total billings that were required. And so you would probably set your budget at 530 or 535 or maybe 550. This has got a built-in formula to show you that if you change your numbers around a little bit, whether it's going to cover your budget. Now, we also have some cases where we have chapters that decide to charge a different rate based upon class standing in the house. And so this might be a case where the freshmen and sophomores pay one amount and then each group gets a discount below that. And so if you're trying to figure out something like that, you can put in different sorts of formulas to figure out the computations here, and overall it should be providing you with a figure and telling you whether that's going to meet the needs or not. So that's a pretty straightforward way to do that. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but there's some notes here that really talk about if you want to collect money in dues from your members, you should be trying to make it as simple as possible, and that's by having one payment that's due right at the beginning of the semester. If you do that, you're going to take advantage of that 10% discount from your national organization. And here for a 50-man chapter, if I go up here and I look at the fees here, where we've got 11, here we've got $24,000, almost $25,000 in new member member fees, and we've got, national dues fees and national risk management fees. We've got 7,000, maybe 8,000, and another 8,500, so about $16,500 just based on those 2 points. If you're getting a 10% discount on that, that's $1,600 bucks. That's real money, and that's a way that in a 50-man chapter, you're reducing everybody's chapter dues by 30 bucks a month, basically taking advantage of that discount. So that's very generous of your international organization to do that. So that's something we'd really recommend you take advantage of. Now, if you do have some members that can't make the payment in full up front, that's fine. They give them a 2-payment option where, one payment is due in August and the other payment is due in October or something like that, so they can spread it out. But it's our recommendation to have people build at least 30 days before you need the money, and then to collect that money before school starts, because a lot of your expenses are front loaded to the beginning of the semester. And your first payment to your national organization is due in September. IFC dues are usually due pretty early. The tailgates and recruitment activities are pretty early in the semester. You need access to that money now. So try to collect it right when guys are getting to school or before they get to school, so that you can do the operations that you would like. That's a quick overview of that. And I hope that if you play with that tool a little bit and try it out, that you'll find that it is helpful and makes your job a little bit easier. The next thing I want to share is how to collect money. And if you're going to bill it, you need to collect it. And so in doing this, I've hit on a couple of these points. You need to understand when your expenses become due. You're usually front loaded to the beginning of the chapter, so have most of your payments come in then. You've got to invoice and collect the money before you need it. So as I was saying just a few minutes ago, you should be invoicing 60 days in advance and have the payment required 30 days in advance. That way, if the guys are late a week or two, you've still got the money before you need it. Another part of collecting money is really about the culture of your chapter and what you expect of each other. And I think one of your major fraternity values is accountability, that the brothers should be accountable to each other, should be fair to each other. Everybody needs to pull their weight and make the chapter a better place. And so that expectation has to carry over to billing and collecting money. So as a chapter treasurer, you should be creating the expectation at chapter meetings and through communications and billings that you expect the payments to be made on time. Most of your chapters in your bylaws, you'll have a late fee policy. If you don't have a late fee policy, we can suggest some that work. But if a payment is due on the 15th and they haven't made it by the 20th, they should get a late fee. And that's an incentive or a disincentive for them if they don't pay on time. And if you enforce your late fees policies, you'll see that your collection rates will go up. We would suggest that the chapter treasurer present the accounts receivable reports at the chapter meetings, letting everybody know or passing around a list of who's paid and who hasn't paid. there's an unspoken element of peer pressure that goes on there that will get guys to pay. We had a great treasurer when I was in school. He posted the list above the urinal. So when guys were in the bathroom, they saw the delinquent guys list, and a guy, when he sees that, he'd walk down the hall, cut the treasurer a check, walk back in over the urinal, and cross his name off the list. You know, there's just, again, this expectation that people are supposed to pay. When people don't pay, the treasurer needs to be following up on them. What's going on? Do they need help? What's the challenge? You know, did they blow the money their mom gave them for dues on pizza and beer? You know, what's going on? And that follow-up will get more people to pay. And ultimately, you know, and this is often in your bylaws, if someone doesn't pay and they've gone 30 days without paying, you should be suspending services or privileges to them. And again, that's something that should be announced. In our bylaws, we had a situation where if a guy was not paid up over 30 days, he wasn't allowed to vote in chapter meetings, and he wasn't allowed to even attend formal chapter meetings. If people were overdue on their dues, they couldn't vote in recruitment votes. And we have a guy who was on the borderline, and somebody who hadn't paid wanted to vote one way or the other on the guy. They'd run upstairs, get their checkbook, and write the treasurer a check so they could vote in the recruitment elections. So, you know, those things will create the urgency for people to pay. And certainly if a guy isn't paying for his food service bill, he shouldn't be eating the meals. And so a lot of that really takes a treasurer with a backbone, with a thick skin, to uphold it so that it's fair to the people who have paid on time. And a general rule of collections is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you're talking to the guy once a week saying, hey, where's the money? We need your money. Where's your payment? A guy's going to find out a way to get you the money, or to talk to mom and dad to get a check, or whatever. You know, they take it out of their next paycheck if they're working a second job, whatever, so that they can continue to be a big part of the chapter that's important to them. The next thing that's important for the treasurer is paying bills. The big things that we want to hit on here are you should pay your vendors in a timely basis. The fraternities have a really bad reputation on most campuses for not paying their bills on time. And because of that, a lot of service providers are either going to charge you a lot more or aren't going to do work for you at all. So make sure you pay them on time, and you'll get better service and better pricing. If you're writing checks, you should be writing them off of invoices that you've received from people. Not that, you know, Joey down the hall said we owe the cook, you know, $500 for an extra meal or something like that. There should be an invoice that you're writing the check based on, and you should keep copies of those invoices in your records so that if there's ever a question or dispute, you have something to go back to rely upon. We also would recommend be careful with your reimbursement policies. If chapter chairman or social chairman, whoever, go out and buy things for the chapter, those things should be approved in advance and should have a specific amount approved or a limit approved. And then in order for that person to get reimbursement, he needs to provide the receipts of what was actually purchased so that everything is, again, transparent and above board. I'd also urge you to be very careful with handing out chapter credit or debit cards. They tend to be abused very much, and we see all sorts of extraneous charges on them where guys are taking their girlfriends out to lunch or buying a round of drinks at the bar for people or things like that. And that's a way to get into trouble. And then lastly, you should be paying these via check or ACH payment. You shouldn't be handing cash out to people. There's no record for it. You're going to get into disputes, and then it becomes one person's word against another, and that's a very uncomfortable position to be in. So we have a solution for all of this. It's called our Easy Bill system, where all of the invoices are submitted and uploaded digitally. The officers receive an email that they can log in and look at those digital invoices and then click a checkbox to approve them. Once those are approved, those checks are automatically written and sent out to the vendors. Also, all of those expenses are included on your financial statements. So your financial statements are already having all of the money that's coming in through the system showing up on the financial statements. And then if you process your expenses this way, your expenses are going to all appear on your financial statements automatically. There's no bookkeeping for the chapter to do. Everything is maintained digitally for future access. You can run reports and see all of this through a digital portal that you log into 24/7. And lastly, all of that information flows through to your IRS tax return, which makes that process really easy. So if that sounds like something that would be beneficial for you, in this case, it's, this whole system is maybe an added $30 a month to have all of those services taking place based on a 50-man chapter, $30 to $45 a month. It's really not a lot to make your job a lot easier. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please reach out to us. Another thing we want to share, especially for our treasurers, is that you really need to be considering your own risk and the risk of the chapter for not following your international risk management policies or following the law. And so 3 important points here. No payments should be written from a chapter account for alcohol or drugs. Okay, that would seem obvious, but you would be surprised at how many chapters we start to work with that when we go through their books, if there was ever a problem and the national organization or authorities audited your books and found like a $3,000 check written out to Matt's Liquor World, you're just putting a nail in your own coffin right there. Also, there should not be a slush fund or another bank account that you're keeping money in to purchase alcohol from, separate from the main chapter account. Again, if you're doing that, that's a violation of the risk management rules. And most of all, if you are writing checks from that account, understand that you as the treasurer could be personally liable if someone were overserved and drank too much and got hurt or got killed in that situation. In that case, the police and the lawyers are going to come in and they're going to trace the money back to whoever wrote that check or signed that check, or if the executive committee or treasurer approved the writing of that check or paying that, they're coming back to you. And now if you as a chapter treasurer have written a check that resulted in someone dying because they got in a DUI car accident, you could be facing a life-changing event there that at a minimum is probably going to cost you 20 grand in attorney's fees to get out of, and at a maximum you could end up serving some jail time. So we kind of hate it when the people we work with end up in jail. That's not a good outcome for our chapter treasurers. So just be aware of the risk that you're taking if you're going to do any of those things. And it's much better to come up with other ways to handle this sort of thing with a BYOB policy or some things like that. All right. I mentioned earlier that contracts are a big part of a treasurer's job. You should be reviewing and approving those contracts. An important principle to understand legally is generally whoever writes the contract is who is favored in that contract. So if a food service company writes a food service contract that they give you, 9 times out of 10, that contract is going to have terms in it that are more favorable to the food service company than to the chapter. And so you have to be aware of that and be careful. And there's terms and things about workman's compensation and being able to adjust the count of the members that are being served in a food service contract, for example. All of those things need to be careful. And understand that in most cases, most of those contract terms are negotiable. So if you see a contract and you're unsure about it, we would really recommend that you reach out to an alumni member, to maybe a parent that has a lot of business experience, chapter advisor, someone at your national office, or to one of us at AFM, and we'll give it a quick look and raise any red flags for you to look at. The larger the dollar amount on the contract, the more scrutiny it needs to receive. And we see food service contracts that are very commonly 100,000 to 150,000 a year, and we see chapter members just signing them without even reading them, and that can lead to a lot of problems. So make sure that you get some help with that. I mentioned the IRS 990 returns before. Almost all chapters need to file these. As a chapter treasurer, you should be asking your former treasurer to get copies of these so you have something to work from. Understand that your chapter probably has a tax ID number with the federal government, and that your report needs to be filed under that tax ID number. That number will usually be on previous tax returns, or if you don't know where to get it, you could go to the bank where your chapter has an account, and they will usually have that number associated with the bank account. As far as the tax returns go, if your total dues and receipts are less than 200,000, there's a simpler form that's called 990EZ that you can fill out. But if your total annual receipts are greater than 200,000, you have to file the full 990 report. And typically these reports are due, technically it's the 5th month following the close of your fiscal year. Okay, most chapters are probably on a calendar year, a January through December year, which would make those reports due on May 15th. But some chapters have a chapter year that starts in August and ends in July. In that case, the report could be due in December or something like that. So it's important that you understand when that due date is. If you can't make that due date, you can file a simple form and sign it and send it to the IRS. It will extend that deadline for another 3 months. Okay, if you fill out these 990 reports, typically there's no taxes that you have to pay. Your group is considered a not-for-profit organization. You don't have any taxes. However, if you don't complete it on time, or if you don't complete it at all, you're going to get penalties and you're going to get money assessed by the IRS. And there's a little funny picture of Nancy up there in the upper right-hand corner. Nancy and the IRS are going to bring the hammer down on you. The politicians don't give much leeway to businesses that don't pay their taxes on time. And you know, if you think a $25 late fee is high for a guy not paying your dues, you're probably looking at late fees here around $2,000, and they're based on your past returns. They're going to say, well, you probably had $100,000 in revenue, so we're going to charge you 20% tax, and now you're going to get a tax bill for maybe $8,000, $10,000. You know, who knows? And they're going to expect you to pay that. And if the chapter doesn't respond, they're going to go into your chapter bank account and just take the money out without you asking them. And, you know, I don't want to make this too overly dramatic, but just suffice to say, this isn't something you want to mess around with. And there's actually a law that if you don't file your 990 for 3 years in a row, which is really easy for chapter treasurers to forget, you lose your not-for-profit status, then you have to pay corporate taxes. And so now you're going to have to increase your whole dues budget by 25% to pay the taxes the government wants until you can get your tax exempt status restored again. So suffice it to say, if this is something that you're uncomfortable with or you're not sure about, you know, we do these reports for DKE chapters for around $500 to $750 per year using your data. If you have good data or use our Easy Bill Plus system, it will be even less. So finding a person that understands this and can do it makes sense. And you know, this is part of how business operates and corporate leadership works. You know, when there's areas that the business owners don't have a lot of specific knowledge of, or don't know how to do themselves, or don't want to take the time to do, they go out and find a professional that is skilled at it, pay the professional, and it will often end up being less expensive and create less problems from the company than if you try to fight through it yourself. So know that you've got some assistance out there if needed. The last thing I want to close with is that being a chapter treasurer is really a great role in the fraternity. In my opinion, it is the most important position in the fraternity. And, you know, I'm sorry if I'm offending some of your beta brothers out there, but the treasurer is really the guy that makes sure the operations work, tick, everybody gets treated fairly, everybody pays their bill. Without a good chapter treasurer, your group is in serious trouble. So it is an important position, and it's a great learning experience. We have chapter treasurers that are running budgets between $50,000 and $500,000 annually. And when you can go into a job interview, or when you get your first job and you have the experience of understanding financial reports and billing and invoicing and contracts and things like that, you're going to stand out heads and shoulders above other candidates there. You're going to get a job before other people, and you're going to rise to the promotion list faster than other people. So doing a good job on this is really going to come back to benefit you. Additionally, the guys in the chapter house throw a lot of respect at a good treasurer. They know the difference between a good treasurer based on how things are running. And they will actually respect a treasurer who's a little bit of a hard nose to get guys to pay their bills, because they understand that that's important to the chapter for its operations and to keep everybody else's dues as inexpensive as possible. So you're going to get a lot of respect in the chapter house for doing a good job. The chapter is going to benefit through having more money and better activities. Overall, it's just going to be a better chapter experience. So given all that, we'd like to support you in doing a great job out there, and open the floor to anybody that has any particular questions on what we have shared this evening. Please put them in the Q&A, and I'm going to unmute a bunch of people and allow people to talk if they wish. All right, well, it looks like I've either put everyone to sleep or we've answered all their questions. I'm not seeing anybody with their hand up or anybody that has put anything in the Q&A that we haven't already addressed. So with that, I'm going to conclude the session. I am very pleased to be able to share this information and to work with Travis and Turner and a great DKE International Fraternity staff. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or we can help. We want to make your job easier and want to make your chapter experience as positive as possible. Thank you, gentlemen.